Hey everyone, welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. We're glad that you're joining us today, and we hope that you find this conversation helpful, insightful, and encouraging as you lead your students in ministry. We wanted to stop and take a moment to remind you about our social media. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at TalkStudentMin, or you can find us on our website, www.studentministryconversations.org. Today, we are going to hear a conversation that Russell had with Alain Leistikow, and he is a youth pastor at FUMC Livingston, and he's going to sit down with Russell today to talk about global mission trips. And so this is something that is probably going to be a pretty cool episode to listen to. Russell, can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yes, it was great to sit and talk with Alain. And in this interview, we talk about taking your youth on out-of-the-country mission trips, why to do it, how to do it, and what are some of the things to look out for and to think about as you are planning your process and going on your trip. So it's a great conversation, and I hope you enjoy.
Man, that sounds great. Without any further ado, here's Russell's conversation with Alain.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast. And I'm excited. This is our first episode, interview episode back. So if you are catching this, you can go back one episode and catch up on our recap. And we kind of went back through and recapped all of our episodes from the fall. But now we're kind of starting off with our new series. And so we have several episodes lined up, and we're starting off this week with Alain Leistikow. And so instead of me telling you about him, I'm going to let him tell you about him. So Alain, tell us who you are, what you're doing now. Kind of, you can go as long or short as you want, but kind of tell us who Alain is.
Yeah, thanks, Russell, for having me on. I appreciate it. So again, my name is Alain Leistikow, and I've been in youth ministry for almost 11 years now, 6 of those here in Livingston, Texas, at First Methodist in Livingston. And how I kind of got into ministry was I was a director of coaching for a youth soccer organization out in Claremont, Florida. And I was going through a bit of a rough patch in my faith and in my life. And I went to Aldersgate Walk to Emmaus, and I just felt the Lord call me into ministry, call me into youth ministry. I really didn't feel fulfilled being a coach. And I felt like the Lord had more for me. So I went off to Asbury Theological Seminary, where I got my master's in theological studies, specializing in youth ministry. And then I started my full-time career down in Houston at Foundry United Methodist Church. And then about a year later, moved up to Livingston, and I've been there ever since. And absolutely love the church, love the community, and just love where God has put me.
So Alain, I know from some youth stuff, and then just knowing in our conference, and we're the Methodist Church, and so very connectional, and so youth directors know each other and things. But also spent a week hanging out with him for UM for that mission trip, and so Alain, I did not know, even from when we talked, I don't think I picked up that you had gone to Asbury.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm working on that process right now. So
yeah, I went to the Dunham campus in Orlando for about a year, and my intention was to move out to Wilmore. But something that I was very keen on, both in undergrad and graduate, is to graduate with no college debt. So I decided that, I really wouldn't be able to move out to Wilmore without incurring debt from school. So I just stayed with my parents in Orlando and did my last 2 years online. And it was an absolute blast. I love Asbury, and it's a great community, a great school, and have a lot of fond memories from there.
So, Alain, I did meet with you at UM, which is one of our local mission trips we do. But today, we're not talking about that. We're going to expand that out and talk about international missions and mission trips and going that. So you have led several teams on those. And so I'm hoping today that you'll just share with us some tips, some philosophy, some reasons why, and some insight that would help somebody else who, as we are able to start doing some trips and things again, somebody who is looking at doing a mission trip. So can you tell us kind of, first of all, why do you take youth groups on international missions? I mean, it seems like it's going to be a little bit of a headache, lot more details to deal with. You could easily do one of the local mission trips, which are awesome. Yom Army, Big House Summit. For our denomination, those have been some of the ones that we do, and you may have in your denomination some as well. But why do you do international? What's the benefit of an international mission trip?
Yeah. So first and foremost, for at least in my context, it was something that the Lord had asked me to do and continues to ask me to do. So just out of being a servant, I'm obedient to what he asked me. But secondly, for the students, Army, Jump, Big House are fantastic programs. And I encourage anybody to go participate in those. But there is one fatal flaw. You can go home. On all those trips, you're always about a 2 to 3 hour drive away. So if things go south, you can always go home. But on international, you can't. It really requires deep, immense trust and faith, not just in Jesus, but also in the team and the leaders who are present on that trip. Because if you're in the Dominican Republic, or if you're like I took a team out to Israel in 2020, when you're that far away from home with plane tickets being as expensive as they are, there's no way of going home. You just because you get homesick, just because you're not happy or you don't like the fact that you're washing with a bucket, you're stuck, and you just have to trust that Jesus is going to take care of you. And that's, for me, that is probably the most important and pivotal reason why I send students on international mission trips. Because there's nothing more raw and nothing more real than when you are forced to have to trust Jesus no matter what.
Yeah. So when you're thinking of these trips, like what is your process when you're thinking, hey, I've got a group, I want to take them on a trip? What are just some of the things that you start to think about? So what I'm thinking about with this question is, you may have somebody right now who's listening, who's like, hey, I definitely want to do a trip. How far out do you think of these things? Or just kind of tell us a little bit of insight into your process of taking a group on a trip once you've decided this is what I want to do, what the next steps are?
So for me, it started back when I was in seminary. I had a very surreal experience with the Lord. I'm not going to go into the whole story now, but it was kind of the precursor to our Israel trip. But from that experience that I had with the Lord, I felt compelled and I felt called as a soon-to-be youth director that international missions was going to be an important part of what I do for the students, because I want to help them experience Jesus in a very real and profound way. Because again, like I said earlier, when you're at Army, Big House, Jump, when you're only a few hours away, you always have that freedom to go home. And so when you don't have that freedom, again, you really have to invest yourself in your team and in your mission and of course, in Jesus. Now, for me, I typically start working about a year to a year and a half out from my trip. I spend a lot of time in prayer, seeking the Lord and wondering and asking when is the right time? When do you want us to go? So like, for example, here in Livingston, when I joined in the summer of 2015, part of my interview process is my platform was international missions. I wanted to make that a core component of what this ministry does. And the reason why is because I understood the context of Livingston. As someone who's grown up in small rural towns here in America, I understand that a lot of people move to those communities in order to be in a safe, protected bubble. They can control everything in that environment. So for these kids, one of the best ways for them to grow in their faith is to get outside of that bubble, get outside of that safety comfort zone, and really have to experience the world around them. Like, for example, I have a former student who graduated a couple of years ago who really, really wanted to go on international missions with us, both to the Dominican Republic and to Israel. And the one thing that kept her from going was her father. And her father didn't want to go because he wasn't in control. He couldn't control where we stayed. He couldn't control the driver of the vehicle. He couldn't control the restaurants we ate at. And this is East Texas, so he couldn't control the fact that he could carry a gun with him. But that sort of mindset permeates these rural communities. And so that's one of the reasons why I kind of brought this on. So when I introduced this idea of international missions, while this ministry had done it before, it had only been like once or twice in like the 10, 15 years that this ministry had been around. And so with me coming in, I knew it was going to take a few years. It took about 3 years to finally get this youth group at a place where they could go. And then all I did, I opened it up to my leadership team, which consists of both students and adult volunteers or parents. And I said, hey, this is what the Lord has laid on my heart. What do you guys think? And I basically let them run with it. They prayed over it and decided, you know what? 2018 is the year. The Lord is calling us to go to the Dominican Republic. And so we went online and we found an organization called Praying Pelican. They're an amazing institution. They basically do all the work for you. So if you're brand new to this, go to Praying Pelican Missions and get in contact with one of their people, and they will help organize all this. But it takes about a year. You have to start about a year out because it takes that long to raise all the funds to go on a trip. It takes that long in order to get passports, get permission slips formed, get vaccines if you need them, or if they're required, or if you want to have them. So I say a minimum of 1 full year before your departure date.
And I will make sure to include anything you share. So we'll make sure to include Praying Pelicans Missions in the show notes. And there's other great organizations out there that do that as well. So, and so you definitely would advise at least somebody starting off to find one of these groups to go through.
Yeah.
So tell us about a trip. Like, do you have any stories from a trip, or just kind of tell us anything you'd like to share about your adventure and your trip that may help somebody, or just to tell us why, maybe inspire somebody to go on a trip of their own?
Yeah. So you were talking about earlier, some highs or some scary moments, or just various opportunities that exist within missions. Well, in our very first international mission trip as the youth director, we went to the Dominican Republic in 2018, and we were going with a team out of Michigan. Well, they had some serious travel issues. And so we left Saturday morning from Houston at about 3:00 in the morning. Then by the time we actually got to our location with the other team, it was 5 a.m. Sunday morning. So we'd been up for more than 24 straight hours. But that's not the horror story. The horror story is that one of the students on the Michigan team that morning, when we were kind of getting up on Sunday morning, just kind of starting to stretch our legs a little bit, he decided to play a little bit of shadow basketball on the basketball court at the school we were staying at. Well, this is the Dominican Republic in a very rural, poor community, so they don't do any maintenance. And the wooden backboard was all rotted. He didn't know that, goes up, does a slam dunk, and pulls the backboard off the pole, falls on his ankle, breaks his ankle in like 3 different places, and dislocates it in like 4 different places. And this, again, kind of goes back to having to trust in Jesus, that, he had to spend enormous amounts of time just sitting in his room in the heat of the Caribbean in the middle of the summer, because a lot of things that we were doing revolved walking. And so he had to spend a lot of time with just the locals there around the school. He had to spend a lot of time in his Bible, a lot of time in prayer. He listened to a lot of worship music. But that's kind of what I'm talking about, is that, it takes immense trust and immense faith, because even for him, he had broken ankles, dislocated ankles. He couldn't go home, even though his family had the means and had the funds to take him home. When they called his pediatrician back in Michigan, the pediatrician straight up said, "Do not get on a plane. That's dangerous and deadly, and do not do that." And so we had to stay for 7 straight days. And so that's a rare situation that doesn't happen very often. But on the other side of that, when we're in the DR, one of the pivotal moments that I think really made that trip worthwhile was when we were going home. I had kind of a theme the entire week with my specific team. And it was trust in the Lord, trust in the Lord, trust in the Lord. So we got on our bus to drive out to Punta Cana from Santo Domingo. And we stopped at a mall halfway there to get some breakfast, do some shopping, that sort of stuff, just touristy stuff. Anyway, our bus driver, he decides to, how do I put this? He decides to live within sin. So he ends up being almost 2 hours late to pick us up, which by the time we got to the airport was at departure time. The plane was supposed to be taking off from the tarmac. So I'm telling my team, guys, listen, we got to trust in the Lord, even if we have to change our plans and fly back later on this afternoon, and we just have to stay here in Punta Cana. That's okay. Jesus has us. He has everything under control. Just trust him. We walk up to the line, and there is probably 400 people in line. And we're thinking, great, that's it. We're stuck in the Dominican Republic. Well, the Fast Pass line was completely open. So I said, why not? Let's just take a risk. If they get upset with us, they'll just put us in the back of the line. It's not going to hurt anything. We're already late anyway. So we get in the express line, and the agents come by, and they give us, the international papers to fill out so we can get back into customs in the United States. And as we're filling it out, another agent is walking around screaming, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. Well, that's where our first stop was. And so, we raise our hand like, hey, that's us. We're going to Atlanta, Georgia. And they pull us out of this 400-person line, bring us up front, check us all in within like 5 minutes. This is a team of almost 15 people, checks us in about 5 minutes. They give us an agent to walk us directly to the plane. And I kid you not, the plane was 10 minutes late. So when we finally boarded, the rest of the passengers, they had just been sitting on the plane for about 5 minutes. We were thinking, they had been sitting there for 45 minutes to an hour, but they'd only been sitting there for 5 minutes. We got on the plane, we flew home, we got home right on time, exactly as the Lord had promised. And that was the most important life-changing moment for that team, was because these are a bunch of kids who have never even left Polk County, let alone left Texas or the United States. They go to a foreign country for a week away from their moms and dads, almost miss their flight, but God says, no, I'm going to bring you home. I promise a way out for all trials. And that changed the students. I mean, they totally view Jesus in a different way. And again, that's one of the reasons why I feel international missions is so important to youth and youth ministry.
So how does that continue once you get back? Like, what changes have you seen in your youth ministry in other aspects throughout, Christmas and through the summer and things like that with a group that goes on those trips? Like, how does that impact your youth ministry long-term?
Yeah. So when, to answer that question, before we left, I made it abundantly clear that, we're going to a very poor community. The only way to use the toilet was to pour water into the bowl. The only way to take a shower is big blue barrels. You dipped a bucket, you poured water on your head. We're coming to a community that has nothing. So that when we come back, we have to understand that all of our friends and family have not experienced what we have. And so that we need to be mindful that they're going to waste things. They're going to be selfish. They're going to be, all caring about money and greed and things that they desire in their heart. They're going to sin. They're going to lust. They're going to do all these things, but we're going to be changed. And we have to understand that now we need to tell our story. And so what I encouraged the students and the adults to do later on that year in November, when we hosted Youth Sunday, is I had them come up and share their story. So that they could share with the congregation and with the community what God had done in their lives and how that they were different, how they had changed, how they'd drawn closer to Jesus. And after that, most of these kids were my student leaders. And so, their leadership became even greater as a direct result. They were much more appreciative of what we have. They were much more patient with, say, a new student who that might be the first time they're coming into church and they're being disruptive. They're much more patient. And what I saw was students who were afraid of their faith embrace their faith. who they prayed in private, they read their Bible in private, but now are volunteering to pray us into worship, volunteering to read scripture during the sermon, volunteering to lead Bible studies. And at least within that trip, I saw immense change for the leaders and how they were able to deepen their faith as a direct result of that. Now, I will say that for me, my mission trips, they always have themes, they always have purposes. So the DR was all about service and was all about introducing international missions. But my Israel trip in 2020, that was all about spiritual formation. We did a little bit of serving, but it was about going and learning, going and studying, going and being still. So when you're planning your mission trips, the first thing you need to do is you need to discern, why is the Lord calling you and your team to go on this trip? What's the purpose? Because that purpose will help to dictate and govern everything you do throughout the mission. To also help the leaders, whether it's you as a youth director or youth worker or an adult volunteer, having that purpose helps them better facilitate the program and better facilitate for the students and to the students.
Yeah. I think it's important to bring out because when we think of missions, right, it's a mission trip if I go and I build a roof or I build a wheelchair ramp or I do that. And so what you're saying is that's not always the case. Now, I understand that from doing trips. We went to Bolivia about 15 years ago or so, and we went the whole week and we weren't doing any work, quote unquote. We went to someone's house and hung out with them, and we went to the village and ate dinner in the village, and we did this. And we were sitting there, we were frustrated because we were like, hey, when are we going to do mission work? When are we going to do something? And they actually created work for us to do. What we did, it would have taken them 15 minutes and we spent all day doing, like we're gathering rocks or something.
That's the way it goes.
And so when we finished, we realized, and we were talking, debriefing a little bit, and we were the first team from this organization. We went with CFAT, which is in Lineville, Alabama. We went with CFAT, and we were the first team into this village, and there were teams that were coming after us. Our goal, our purpose there was to create those relationships. So that way, when other groups came in, they trusted the groups that were coming in. And we were kind of a handpicked. The leaders knew us and they knew that we would do well with that. But I mean, I remember some frustration on my part until I realized, not a mission trip doesn't mean we're going to just build something. And, sometimes they create stuff for us. To make us feel good, and that's not what we should be doing. So, can you talk? Do you have some insight into that and some of the things of either defining missions or also maybe being sensitive to when you're going into a foreign country and realizing that what they need might not be what you think they need?
Yes. So I've had an epiphany recently that the postmodern church bifurcates missions from faith, in that, a lot of churches have a mission team, and they do everything missions. They plan it, they fundraise for it, they organize it, and they're putting on big special events where you go off to do some sort of activity in some other location. But that is not what Jesus teaches. And I learned this actually through my wife. Natalie is an avid mission trip taker. She's been on, I think, like 8 or 9. She's led like 7 of them. But she's a very tiny woman and is not construction minded. So for her, how can she participate in missions if that's not what she does? She doesn't like construction. She doesn't like building wheelchair ramps. She doesn't like building houses or churches or, doing those sort of things because she doesn't have that skill set. She wants to talk. She wants to share. She wants to lead worship. She wants to have an intimate relationship with people. So if you're listening to this, again, that purpose for your trip will define, what missions is to you. And I believe that, Jesus teaches us missions is who we are. It's not what we do. If we love one another as he loves us, well, that is an act of missions. In fact, if you even look at like some of the scripture that defines, missions, the Great Commission, for example, the most prominent one, nowhere in there does it talk about construction. Nowhere in there does it talk about building anything, even though, we know Jesus as a carpenter or his father as a tecton, but nowhere in there does it talk about construction. So if you're going on a trip and you might do one construction project, or you might spend the morning doing painting, that's okay, because the purpose of your trip is not to paint a wall. While that's great, and that is missions for someone, that is giving someone rest who otherwise may not get a Sabbath rest because the community is too poor. They have to work 7 days a week. But the fact that, you're just there, the fact that Jesus sent you, that you raised $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, your mission is just to share Jesus, to share love, to be in community. In fact, my upcoming mission trip that we're going to be taking to Guatemala, probably in the summer of 23, that's exactly the purpose, is relationship building. We have a local mission called Hechos Dos that we've adopted as a youth ministry, and that's what we're going there to do. We're just going there to build relationships. If it means we're going to build a school, we're going to build a school. If it means we're going to just hang out and play soccer with the kids, or baseball or lacrosse or whatever it is they play, or just kick the rock, that's what we're going to do. Because that's what Jesus did. Jesus just spent time with people. He met their needs. So, missions, again, is about how the Lord has defined your trip. And that's why prayer is pivotal to discerning your trip.
And it's, sometimes I've heard stories of this. I haven't been on a trip like this, but I've heard trips and seen trips where, the group, like you said, the group that does missions goes into a place and they're creating work for them to do, which disrupts the normal flow. And so I think it's important to look and find ways that you are fitting in and appropriate, or they are building something that we would use in the United States that is unusable or is not practical for that trip. So I think it's important definitely to through prayer, through knowing whoever you're working with, whether it's an organization or a community in there, is go in there and say, what do you need? What is God calling us to do that you are working on? How can we come alongside you, as opposed to we're here to build a house, or we're here to pass out candy or whatever like that. So you go ahead.
When you work with organizations like Praying Pelican Missions, that's exactly what they do. Their whole job is to build a network with the community and discern what they need. Because again, missions is not about you. This is not to make you feel good. This is not to, especially for students, this is not to pad your resume for colleges. This is about you going and serving, you going and meeting their needs. And so, if you're new to this, don't fret about what sort of activities they're going to do, because the organization that you're working with, they will plan all that stuff out for you. And what they do is they will actually sit down with you and they'll talk to you about it. What does your team want to do? What do you guys feel called to do? What is your skill sets? What are you wanting to improve on? How do you want to grow? And then they share what the needs of the community are, and they try to match up as best they can, your skill set with their needs, plus complement your weaknesses so that you can grow as a team and grow as individuals. But yeah, if you're new, start with an organization. Go with some organization that plans it all for you. All you're doing as a leader and as a team is just going and participating. Because it is stressful. There's a lot of work that goes into this. And again, that's why it takes about a year to put all this stuff together. But something else that I would like to touch on when it comes to planning that I forgot to mention earlier, is that for me, it's not just about fundraising and the money. It's also about the spirit. So I require that the team that goes, we go through a Bible study for a full year. We get spiritually ready for what God has in store for us, so that when we go there, we're going with the right mindset and the right heart. And so I highly encourage, even if you've been doing this for years, and if you've never done a Bible study with your team for about a year, I highly encourage it. Make sure that you do that, because it really preps your team for what they're experiencing, and helps them to be ready for what they're going to confront and face.
So is that just that team? Y'all get together once a week or whatever like that? Just y'all, the ones that are going?
Correct. Yeah. So the adult volunteers and the students who have signed up, we'll meet. For me, we do it once a month just because I know the kids are really busy. I'm really busy. And so, I want to, be respectful of everyone's time. So we meet once a month and, I put together an entire study that's based on the theme for that trip in order to, again, get us spiritually prepared. I mean, that's what Jesus did. He spent 40 days, in the desert to get spiritually prepared for his mission, for 3 years of being in ministry. And so it's important that we do the same thing, that we prep in order to get ready for the trip.
Now, I know that we have a lot of people listening who are smaller churches, and Livingston at one time was a smaller church, but y'all are kind of going now. And but I know we have people from smaller churches, maybe have 5 or 6 people in their youth group. So if somebody wants to do missions and they don't have a mission team, they don't have this, what are some ways that you would think that somebody could still do a trip like this, even if they don't have the resources or the numbers that you would think of as far as putting a team together? Yeah.
So I can tell you that the only reason you need numbers is for flights. Airlines will not give you a group discount if you're lower than 10 people. So 10 people is a minimum just to get cheap airfare. But if you only have five kids and 3 adult volunteers, go on a trip. Because here's the thing, at least with Praying Pelican, if you only have 5 total people, 8 total people, they will actually match you with another team that only has 3 people or 10 people. And so you'll be able to join up with another organization or with another church in order to be able to go on this trip. So, I don't want size to be an indicator as if you're allowed to go on mission trips. Size is irrelevant. Because if the Lord has called you to go on a trip, guess what? He's going to send you, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's going to happen one way or the other. But yeah, I don't know if the organizations you've been with, Russell, if they've done the same thing, match up your group with another group, and I think it's a pretty consistent practice. Because for a lot of these mission organizations, the way that they earn their income is through mission trips. So even if it's just 5 people, that's 5 separate people that are paying, that's 5 separate incomes going into that business. So they'll do everything they can to make sure that you're matched up with another church and you're able to go no matter what size you're taking.
And that's why I want to bring that up, because I know that, someone may look at it and go, well, I could never do this. I could never do this because of size or because of whatever. And to let them know that, yes, you can, because we matched up, CFAT matched us up with groups, and they always were working to put together teams. It's also part of the benefit of doing it a year in advance and contacting them, because they can go, hey, you've got this group, or we're going to switch this out. It's almost like, for those of you who in the Methodist Church, at least doing Yom Army or something like that, they match you up with other churches for local missions. It's the same way they'll do that with these groups that are heading out. You talked about how it affected your youth group, and I asked you that. But what are some of the things that maybe it's done for your church in general, for the adults, the older adults? For do you see any effect of that carrying over? Maybe as they come together to send them off, or when they come back and share their stories? You talked about that, but do you see anything that is beneficial, or that just the effect that it has on the church body as a whole?
Yeah. So forgive me, this is going to sound a little selfish, but what I've noticed and observed in my time of doing international mission trips, again, with being a rural community, being in our safe bubble, trust. The parents and the congregation and the church overall has absolute undying trust in me now, because I have taken their children, their most precious commodities, their most precious things in this world. I've taken them to another country and then brought them back. And that's huge for building trust within your community, because it demonstrates your ability to manage very complex, very scary situations that sadly most people only dream of ever doing, because they're just too scared to actually do it. So for me, it has built immense trust. For the students, the parents of the students, the adult volunteers, the church overall, it has demonstrated to them these students care about their faith. Because unfortunately, far too often youth ministry is viewed as kind of like that redheaded stepchild, the ministry that uses all of our resources, and brings nothing into the church. We use up the financial resources because we need buildings, food, we destroy things, but we don't bring in any tithe in. So what this has done for our local community is that it has demonstrated to them, these teenagers, their faith is important to them. They're not here because there's some cute boy, cute girl, their friends are here. They're here because they want a very deep and intimate faith with Jesus, a deep, intimate relationship with Jesus. And for parents, that's huge because that's all they care about. They just want to see their kids growing up in the love of Jesus, in the faith of Jesus, and coming back and hearing the stories and seeing that now their kids are saying, okay, mom and dad, you've skipped Sunday morning twice in a row now. You need to go to church. And that's actually happened. When we got back from the Dominican Republic, that happened to a couple of parents where their lives were just busy and they'd been missing Sunday morning. And their children were like, no, it doesn't matter if you're tired. We're going to church, because there are kids and people who don't have this church building and are still worshiping God no matter how tired they are. And that's a huge impact on the parents. Now that changes the way they view their kids and the way they view youth ministry, which is a huge benefit, so.
Well, so as we're kind of talking through this and kind of, wrapping up just a little bit or getting closer to the end, what are some tips, just some basic things? Hey, if you were sitting down talking with me and I said, Alan, I want to go on a youth mission trip. What do I need to know? What do I need to keep in mind that I might not think of whenever I'm, looking into it myself? What are some things that you're going to help me avoid some pitfalls, or that's going to save me some money or save me some headaches? I'm looking at that.
So a fundraiser is key. $5, guess what? That's $5 extra towards your trip that you didn't have before. And when God calls you on a trip, guess what? He set that money aside before you even started talking about mission trips. He already knew you were going to go. He was already planning to send you. So he already set that money aside. The real trick is going and finding it. But some of the things that I definitely would advise, anyone who's listening who might be doing this for the first time, understand that people are sinners. All right. And when you're in these sort of uncomfortable situations, that sin is going to come out. They will make jokes and comments under their breath about the community you're in because they're tired, they're stressed, they're under tension, and that's how they release that tension. It's inappropriate and it's wrong, but have grace for your team. If your team has never done this before, they will do that. You will have one kid who will make that, bad joke that, yes, it is incredibly funny and you want to laugh, but, have grace for that student, have grace for those people, because, this is new for everybody. Trust your team. These people that are on this team with you, God handpicked them. Think about that for just a quick second. The King of the universe handpicked each of those members on that team because he knew that each of those people were going to help you as a youth leader or youth worker. So trust your team. Trust the organization you're using. Especially with youth ministry, these organizations, because the liability of dealing with minors is so incredibly high on them, they work very hard to make sure that every single student is safe. Now, granted, as safe as you can be going to a foreign country, but trust the organization. They're working hard to make sure your trip is going to go well. And then, of course, trust Jesus. I know that all this is cliche. I know that it's easier said than done. And I can tell you, when I was fundraising for my Israel trip, and the money wasn't coming in as fast as I needed it to, I sat down with my senior pastor and I was freaking out. My trust was struggling. And, I straight up told him if I couldn't raise the money, I was going to quit because I knew the church wasn't going to trust me anymore, and that was a mistake, because I didn't trust that Jesus had already put everything in place. And he did. He made everything happen. He gave us $50,000 to go on that trip. So trust Jesus because he planned all this. He put it together and he's getting it ready for you. So trust.
So something else that may help either in a mission trip, local mission trip or foreign mission trip, is you've mentioned fundraisers. Do you have just a few you could share that someone may take and be able to use? Just anything that's worked really well for you? I know the contexts are different, everything, but still may spur some ideas for somebody else.
Yeah. So you have your typical ones, food drives, bake sales, car washes, t-shirt sales. We did all those, but the ones that actually worked the most was a stock fundraiser. So what we did is we sold shares, like in the stock market, of each member at certain prices, and that helped them to raise money for their part of the trip. And part of the money raised was going to go to a shareholders banquet when we came back from the trip, but that didn't work out because we had COVID and we got in quarantine. But running a stock fundraiser on your team, that works really well. People love buying shares and knowing that, if you plan something special just for the shareholders, man, they're going to give you money hand over fist.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, go ahead. If you had come back and you had been able to do it, what is that shareholders meeting consist of?
It would have been a black tie dinner served by our students. And I had forewarned at the beginning of the planning process to the team that they were going to have to spend 2 to 5 minutes at the shareholders dinner sharing their experience, and so again, having a banquet that's just for the shareholders, having, information that comes out to them before anyone else, having a really fancy dinner, all those things entice the congregation to want to invest in this trip because it's special and it's unique just to the shareholders.
So shareholders meeting, what are shareholders selling stock? Any others that worked really well for you?
Yeah. So here in Livingston, we have a adult ragdoll league. And they're always,
really?
Yeah. And it's a big deal. Yeah. The adults in this community love ragball. And so we put on a ragball tournament and we did it the weekend before a big statewide tournament. So it was a great time for our local teams to practice before they went off to wherever they went to play the next weekend at an actual, big time tournament. We raised like $6,000 on that fundraiser alone before expenses. I think we actually took home like $4,000. But look in your local community, whether it's ragball, softball, whether it's a local soccer league or whatever it may be, look in your local community and see if they're willing to do something like that. Because, man, you can generate a ton of money just in entry fees alone to participate in the tournament.
And I think what's important with that is also what's important on mission trips is you are looking at the context of the local community you're in and seeing what would work and working through what's going on. And the same thing's going to happen when you go on a mission trip somewhere.
Correct.
Is you're looking at that local community and how God is already working in there and how you can fit into that context. So, well, Alan, any last minute things you would share or inspiration or ideas or thoughts that you would share with anybody before we close?
Yeah. Have fun. International mission trips are an absolute blast. They give you an opportunity to be with your group in a way that you can't do in any other situation, not even UM Army or Big House or Jump or anything like that. Even Lakeview Summer Camp. You cannot be in an environment like this. It's totally unique. But just have fun. Enjoy your time with your team. Enjoy your time with your community because it will change you forever.
Good.
Your faith will grow immensely. Even if you have a bad experience as a leader, you will still have your faith grown as a direct result of that.
I want to jump in on what you said about enjoying and being with your team because, and like I said, I speak from our denomination, from the Methodist Church and the way we do things, but other churches do this as well. And you go to a trip or you go to something and you're with your team, but you're also the program director or you're also doing these. And so I know my trips, you've done it with Praying Pelican. I've done it with CFAT. I go there even for their local missions camp that they do at CFAT. Like I am with my team. I am a volunteer with my team. I'm responsible at night for when we go to bed. But other than that, I get to have conversations that I never would have if I was leading or up on stage or leading music or doing that. But and I think that is huge. And so any opportunity you can find, but those mission trips, forward mission trips, especially make it about your team and you're with them. You are not leading. You are participating.
Yeah. And Praying Pelican, they actually send a pastor with you, so that the pastor is responsible for the spiritual well-being of everyone involved, and to make sure that you can get fed as much as you are feeding your team. So.
All right. Well, Alan, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, where are you on socials or email or anything like that? If somebody wanted to contact you and are you willing to take some questions? And if so, how would we get a hold of you?
Yeah. So first off, you can call the First Livingston First Methodist in Livingston at 936-327-7100. And just ask for Alan, and they'll send you my way. You can find my social media on Instagram, Core Students with an S, 7100. That's our handle, and you can DM me there. And also you'll be able to find, if you talk to me, I can give you my email address, or if you go on our Instagram, you'll be able to find my email address and be able to shoot me a quick email. And I would love to share with you my experiences and any information that can help you put together your upcoming trip.
Yeah. And so if you're listening, I encourage you to reach out or just follow Alan follow Core Students and see what they're doing. And you'll probably get some insight too, as they post things about missions and stuff as well. And check out Praying Pelican Missions. Just check them out, go to their website and see. And if you have questions about how to work with that, I'm sure they are super helpful. I've never worked with them, but you speak very, very highly of them. And so I take that recommendation and pass that on as well. So thanks, Alan, for joining us. And we look forward to talking to you later. And I hope you do really well and enjoy your next mission trip coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Russell. I appreciate it.
Hey, thanks everyone for joining us today. We hope you were encouraged and inspired by this week's episode, and that you found tools that you can use as you pour into the lives of your students.
Yes, and if you found this helpful, please just share this, leave a comment wherever you're listening, or leave a rating. That it helps us so much as we continue to bring you conversations like this. And then as a reminder, tag us on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, and let others know about Student Ministry Conversations and this conversation in particular. Also, if you want to, go onto our website, studentministryconversations.org, and you can purchase a shirt or support the podcast financially that way, so we can keep bringing you these conversations. So, Brent, our second interview episode is coming up next week, and it was yours. So give us a little bit of preview of what we're going to be talking about next week.
Yeah, so next week I sit down with Brian Lucas, and I've known Brian for a while. We actually both were on the youthmin.org team for a little bit, and we helped with generating content and curriculum for them. And so I got to know Brian for a little while, and Brian is now a pastor, but he has been in youth ministry, continues to do youth ministry, and he is sitting down to have the conversation with me on the importance of teaching deeper to students. I'm excited about it. It's honestly one of my favorite podcasts that I've recorded so far, and I can't wait for you guys to listen to it.
Well, that interview with Brian is just 1 week away, so be sure and subscribe and follow us so that way you know when that episode comes out, and we look forward to that, and we'll see you next time.